it is, I think, all about recognizing the opportunities that are in front of you. We're given opportunities every day. Some of them are absolute shit. Like you should be looking at this and running from them. And I think it's our assessment and ability to prioritize those opportunities that's going to set apart real success and probably some real frustration.
This is All Things Fitness and Wellness, hosted by Chrissy Van. Together, we're uniting industry thought leaders and fitfluencers on the mission to inspire innovation and encourage people to live a life fit and well. Brought to you by Fitness World. Your fitness, your way. Visit fitnessworld.ca. In today's episode, we are honored to welcome none other than Lise Kuecker, the visionary founder behind Studio Grow and the Boutique Fitness Coalition. Lise stands as a trailblazing icon within the fitness industry, spearheading the expansion of the boutique sector across an impressive 42 countries and still counting. Her journey is a testament to entrepreneurial excellence, having achieved multi-seven-figure success within the health and wellness realm. In this episode, you'll learn from her journey that began with her enrollment in college at the tender age of 14, an unexpected run-in during photography class featuring none other than Shaquille O'Neal, a triumphant exit from a tech company in her early 20s, and a fervent passion ignited for boutique fitness. Witness her evolution from the inception of her own studios to her current role as the founder and CEO of Studio Grow, where she imparts her wisdom to empower fellow boutique owners to flourish. Beyond her entrepreneurial prowess, Lise graces the airwaves as a fellow podcaster, hosting The Business of Boutique Fitness. Moreover, she stands as a resounding advocate for the industry, particularly in her advocacy endeavors within the United States. Radiating a vibrant persona coupled with invaluable insights called from her extensive journey, Lise's presence is certain to ignite a profound spark within you. Before we get to the episode, be sure to hit like and subscribe. We have new podcasts weekly featuring industry thought leaders and influencers. Plus, we're continuing our gym and wellness haven tours with inspiring founder stories. I'm your host, Chrissy Van, and this is ATFW. Well, on the topic, as we were discussing there, I find you somebody that is incredibly inspiring. You share so much on your social platforms, giving people a little bit of a glimpse into the type of work and inspiration that you can add to their businesses as well. But as I started to learn a little bit about your story, because of course I always do a bit of research before hopping on, I noticed that inner tenacity is not something new when it comes to you. Talk to me about your early 20s, because it sounds like you were someone that celebrated the epitome of hard worker and taking action right from the get-go of your working life.
Yeah. Inner tenacity. My grandmother called it spunk. She was like, "You are spunky." And I was. I had probably a different start to my career than a lot of people, because I started college at a pretty young age. I took my first college classes when I was 14 years old. I had been doing summer classes at LSU actually before then, but I started really a more regular curriculum at that point.
14. How did that happen?
Yeah. I was a big old nerd. I think that's the best way to say it. I love all these people that were like, I was cool. I was like, I was not cool. I was a nerd, and I'm very happy with it. No, I mean, my mom had started college at 15, and I'd been on doing kind of an unusual thing. I'd been on the science fair track, and like kind of hitting the international level of science fair. And when I was probably 12, my parents had walked me over to Tulane and said, "Is there someone here that would let Lise hop in a lab, let her do any of these things?" And they said, absolutely. I wound up with a brilliant PhD named Bernice Kack. And what gradually happened is I was doing more and more and more on the science and research front, and I was already there. My parents had put me in, my mom in particular, into some great programs that LSU had that were specifically for like gifted and talented students. That was this strange mix of both college students and like children. I remember I had Shaquille O'Neal in a photography class with me.
Stop it. How do you not start every conversation with that?
I'm tempted to start every conversation. Like when Shaq and I were hanging out.
Casual.
And I was 12. My grandmother was following us, because that's basically what happened. But it was like that kind of thing that when you're on a little bit of a different trajectory, you start having things open up. So my mom was very against me graduating high school really early. In fact, she had started college obviously super young herself, and she said, God, I don't want you to skip more than a single grade or two on where this is. So I wound up having these other opportunities that when they arose, she said, okay, that's fine. You can spend your afternoons going to college. You can spend your days in high school or mornings in high school. And that's how that started. But what happened is I was getting ready to start college as like a 16-year-old. I mean, I was already, pushing almost into my junior year of college. And that's a very different experience because, you're sort of sitting where most, 20 or even 21-year-olds would be. So when I look back at my early 20s and it was, this incredible period, I moved up to Boston. I planned on doing a master's degree up there. Instead, I wound up having this opportunity to start my first company. It was a tech company. My first pitch was in front of Mitt Romney. He was the lieutenant governor of the state of Massachusetts at that time. And the governor was out having like twins or triplets or something of the like. And I can remember standing up there and realizing I sort of am a child. In fact, to most people, in fact, I'm trying to think what the legal age was for like drinking. And I don't even think I was there yet when I was having these conversations. And yet, it was just this beautiful season that because I had kind of an early start, I also had a chance to do things very differently. And plus, I think I'm an old soul. Like I will acknowledge that. I had as many friends, as a kid who were like in their 60s and 70s that I just thought were fun to hang out
Incredible.
with and still do. In fact, Dan was like, we first moved to Charlottesville. He's like, we need to find friends our age. And I was like, all of our friends are so
When you started that tech company, what was the opportunity that you saw and what was the company? Because regardless of the fact that you had this incredible knowledge base and clearly was a sponge for collecting more knowledge, that's still an incredible accomplishment when you're able to add action to that yearning inside, right?
Sure. Yeah. So the first thing that I realized is that I had all of these friends and roommates from MIT that were there, and so I had this unbelievable technical knowledge. This was in the early 2000s, and it was really just showing up into all of these companies where, quite frankly, just because we were growing up at the right time, we had a knowledge base that people who were 20, 30, 40 years our senior didn't have. They were building out some of the first big web portals. And in Massachusetts, mass.gov was the first major web portal. It was nearly $100 million project. And there wasn't any initial foundation to say, this is what a website needs to look like. This is how it's going to convert. This is how it's going to drive people through this. This is how people are going to click. This is a journey that we're going to take them through. We were poised to do it because we were a generation that was living really every birth and stage of it. And so I saw this huge opportunity. I looked around and I was like, I'm ready to start something. And everywhere I looked, there was opportunities, mainly for us. That initial company was focused more on the government sector, and not just here in the US. We worked with the government in the Dominican Republic, doing some interesting things because we knew the consulate, and he was just saying, we're having problems. And it was all basic tech problems that could be solved relatively quickly. But it was something that at the time, it was moving so fast that there were problems, and an awful lot of people who, again, weren't necessarily at the stage of their life where they could see easy solutions. And that right stage and the right time, the right place and the right time, it's really true in where that is, how it
And
started.
talk about the essence of knowledge is power. You had the knowledge and people needed what you had. Did you exit out of that company then? And then I'm curious how all
Yeah.
of a sudden the fitness industry comes into your realm, because it sounds like you could have just been like, okay, I'm 21 and I'm retired. Not your
I mean,
style though.
it was funny. So yeah, I did exit out of that company, and I went home to Louisiana, and I was bouncing back and forth between Louisiana and Boston and New York. And I kind of was just doing this little dance, like, where did I go? What do I do? And I went home to Franco's Athletic Club. I had been a member there since I was a kid. I grew up swimming in their pools as a high schooler, nannying. I literally off the tennis courts. I played tennis there, 6 days a week in high school. And I walked up their stairs and saw a Pilates reformer for the first time. They were doing classes. It had a big glassed in wall. And I can remember like literally putting my nose like to the wall and just being like, what is this? I had been blessed. Like when I was in Boston, I was taking a lot of classes from some Baptiste certified yoga instructors at the Wang YMCA of Chinatown, which I lived like right next door to. And I'd go to these epic yoga classes. Baron Baptiste had really started a movement early on of what a more athletic style of yoga could look like. And I was heading out to his studio, which had just some luminaries of the yoga industry in it at that time. And it was just like it was all at the right, it was all at that right moment that it was just surrounding me, and I fell in love with movement. I went through a certification like a month after I saw those reformers. Like I literally was like, sign me up. I had time. There's benefits to being in that space where I had time, I had space. I was helping in a friend's studio and kind of doing that for about a 2-year period because I was young. I was traveling all over the world. I was, literally kind of like, hey, I am semi-retired on where this is, but I also had this beautiful opportunity to say, let me just explore this. That being said, I really didn't think fitness was going to be where I was going to land. I thought it was this beautiful stopping point and I was enjoying the journey. And I think that's probably typical of a lot of people in our industry.
I think that's one of the things that makes me enjoy conversations like this so much because almost every conversation I have, somebody has that root, a pivotal moment, something they saw, something they read, a person that inspired them. And even still, they keep that root with them as an anchor. I don't think there's many other industries that you could be a part of that actually are genuinely life-changing for people. So I really understand why, if you have experienced that spark and you're able to connect a way to share that spark, that's an incredible opportunity that's continuously fulfilling. And I think it's because it's this cyclical fulfillment because you're doing it for others and then you're getting something back. So how did you translate then after those 2 years? What was the first step where you're like, hey, I actually want to do more in this space and impact more people?
Yeah, so I had moved out to Washington State. I got married. Dan was in the military, and the military opened up my eyes, first of all, to a lot of disciplines that I wouldn't have ordinarily thought of or been expected with. I had been a dancer, so Pilates and yoga, fueled me very well. I'd been a tennis player. I understood personal training and the idea of that. When you walk into the special operations community, which Dan was involved in 2005, 2006, I was looking at the very first CrossFit boxes that were inside of the military. I was looking at the early stages of TRX that he was hauling out to Iraq and places in the middle of nowhere with him. And it was a real eye opener on how widespread fitness was becoming. Because I was, getting my feet wet in a new area, I started teaching classes much more than I had been teaching up until that point, and I think I'm still friends with the owner of the facility that I was at. And she's like, you were like my godsend. I feel like 22 classes in a week. I'm there. Like I'm trying to meet my people. I'm trying to find my way. And someone walked in my class from Intel Corporation. And I can remember the first time they walked in, meeting them. And like 2 times later, they came back and they said, what you're doing is really different here. Would you ever consider coming into Intel and setting up programming and some type of setup inside of our facilities? And that's really where the big leap started. It was my first, what I would have called studio. It was non-traditional in the sense that they were giving me the space. They were giving me, really a huge amount of incredible customers who, quite frankly, needed movement more than anyone I'd ever seen. They were sedentary, they were engineers, they needed to be sharp on their feet, but they needed to have quick minds on where this was. And so we started with something very small, just a handful of yoga classes. And what it expanded to was us bringing yoga, CrossFit, Pilates, all of these across some incredible spots in Intel. And that's when it started opening my mind that, hey, this is actually like a bigger opportunity. We were incredibly successful. We were generating, strong amounts of cash. The first year was terribly unprofitable, not terribly. It was a break-even year, but it made a lot of
Was the
money.
learning year.
It was a learning year. It was a learning year where I learned that I couldn't actually pay instructors what I was like, I'd come for being an instructor. So I was like, I'm paying you like this insane sum. And then it was like, oh, wait a second. I actually do have a business and I actually do have everything. So it's a great lesson to learn without having to do this with the overhead you would have in a traditional studio. But that was the eye opener where I thought, hey, we've got a difference here. We can really, I can really do something. And you spoke to this earlier, but there's something very powerful about watching your purpose be lived out in people every day. I was having, clients walking in who were pregnant, who were like, I'm sleeping at night. I was having engineers in their 60s walk in, and they were so proud because they could touch their toes for the first time in years. They were coming in and every story added up, and it was just fueling me to be, hey, I've got some real purpose here that I can drive. So when we had some opportunities then to say, hey, do we take this to a brick and mortar facility? We did. And we took a huge leap. And that was our first brick and mortar facilities opened at the end of 2008. I had a 6-month-old when they opened because, that's a super smart move. Like, for everyone who's like,
Not busy at all.
is that a good idea? The answer is no, it's a terrible idea. I can tell you from experience. But so when we started our first facilities, my husband was deploying overseas all the time. We opened them in Mississippi because I'm from New Orleans. My mom was nearby. I literally did the oh so classic, I'm going to move home and stay with my parents for a year with a newborn. Again, another move that I'm like, would I recommend it to everyone? Maybe. It was a lot better than I thought it could have turned out now that I look back at it. And Dan, meanwhile, was off, back and forth to the Middle East, and it started something incredible. So that's how we got started. It is, I think, all about recognizing the opportunities that in front of you. We're given opportunities every day. Some of them are absolute shit. Like you should be looking at this and running from them. And I think it's our assessment and ability to prioritize those opportunities that's going to set apart, real success and probably some real frustration.
Well, and definitely recognizing perhaps when we do make those leaps that weren't the right ones, being able to analyze and evaluate perhaps where our thought process didn't go right. I mean, every single misstep offers a lesson, luckily, but if you don't take the risks at all, you're never going to learn from any of them. I'm curious because you're speaking so eloquently to that period of your life where you have this newborn and you're starting this business and it's growing and it's doing well and orchestrating it. But at the same time, dealing with the fact that it was a very volatile time in the world and your loved one is going overseas. How did you manage? Because it's emotional enough taking a big risk, even if we start to see the advantage. What tools did you use to push through that? Because that is, I mean, it's a burden on both sides in this beautiful way. It's out of love, but at the same time, that's a pretty monumental thing to go through as a person.
I think naivete is a real gift sometimes. I'm in all sincerity. Yeah, it was a season that was really hard for us. We'd had a foster son for 3.5 years. He is now 18. And we were at the end stage of adopting him, and had our adoption reversed. We had a baby. And we had to move. We moved across the country, and my husband was going to start major deployments. And when I look back at that season of just hey, it was a season with a lot of grief and losing Cody. It was a season with a lot of excitement and having Remy. It was a season with a lot of just overwhelm and watching Dan, traveling back and forth. And then you add this business on top of it. I won't say that it was an easy year. I will say that having my family around me is probably the reason it worked. My mom is a psychotherapist, and had been an incredibly successful business owner. Having my mom there, having that support, my grandparents literally drove with me to Mississippi every day with a newborn. They popped in that car. They rode right on over with me. They would play with him on the side. My mother-in-law the incredible Diane Kuecker, would come down for a month at a time. And so I had a support system that I absolutely welcomed. And I will say that, one, not everyone is blessed with that kind of support system. I recognize that and fully see that. I also know that I have a lot of times in my life that I've been tempted to say, I don't want to burden you to be my support system. And that was a time that I really, took a mass lesson that, like, there are seasons where you get to be everyone else's support system. And there are seasons when you need to be the one that's like holding the support system. That was a season for me. I wouldn't have been able to do it without them. And without probably having all of them nudge me to say, I'm not going to take no. Like, I'm just coming and I'm doing it. So yeah, it was wild. It was
That's a
wild.
very powerful statement, because I know so often when we need the support, sometimes we create a story or a narrative in our head that it's some sort of weakness. Whereas you're like, no, we all take our turns to lean on each other. And because you had that support system, I know you would have, just understanding you this little bit in the conversation, you would have figured it out either way, but I'm sure it helped accelerate that path to success when you have that soft place to land when you need it. As you see this business then start to grow, I mean, that's not where the story ends, because I understand you've brought 4 businesses to over 7-figure fruition. So where did the path take you next?
Yeah, I mean, we opened studios all over. I guess that's the best way. Literally, Louisiana, South Carolina, Minnesota. I mean, for everyone who is like, what's the calling here?
I
It
was just
was
going to say, how'd you choose that?
like why would you decide this? We were living in South Carolina. We had a large amount of family there. In Aiken, South Carolina, I had an incredible business partner from there. My husband is from Minnesota. We actually wound up buying and opening facilities around Rochester, Minnesota. So it really was very much we built around family. That is no doubt that worked for us. I knew Dan throughout his career was going to have a significant amount of time that he was going to be gone. And I knew that that was going to be critical for me to be able to continue this and do it in a way that was healthy for me. So we literally built around family, and those grew. We were blessed to grow them to great heights. We were blessed to have an amazing team, like people that are, they've stayed like family. We had incredible clients. We opened in places that we felt were underserved markets. In Mississippi, we specifically chose markets that were more rural in nature, the same in South Carolina. Technically, like, we were on the cusp in Minnesota of where this was, but we felt that we could offer remarkable levels of service and a remarkable variety of services in those markets. And do it better than anyone else. We didn't need to compete against, the Equinoxes of the world or things like that. Instead, my question was, and I come from a family with a lot of background in restaurants. My question always was, how could I bring an extraordinary experience into a place where it was unexpected? And that's really what I think we did extraordinarily well. So when we were bringing in physical therapy or cardiac rehab or, large amounts of personal training, when we launched athletic training, when we launched things that people told us wouldn't work in these markets, I think it was consistently surprising that not only did they work, they thrive. Because we had good processes, but we also had an unbelievable product that was undeniably valuable. Yeah.
How can I bring an extraordinary experience to where it isn't expected? Talk about a powerful question to ask yourself. I love that. I'm putting it in my toolkit. Before we continue our discussion, we're going to flex some gratitude to our sponsor, the British Columbia Personal Training Institute. Learn how to train, gain, and retain clients. Visit bcpti.ca. At this point, were those brick and mortars then under the Studio Grow umbrella? Because I know it started as a brick and mortar and then you transformed. So where does that connection come into play?
Yeah. So they really were totally separate beasts. So every one of our locations was different. It was interesting. We went market by market. So But they were their own, I'll call them, they were their own beast unto themselves. Studio Grow came in because I guess between 2010 and 2014, we probably had about 250 different studio owners or gym owners or people who just, they found out what we were doing and we were doing something different. And they're like, you're super profitable. You're in these markets that shouldn't be able to have this type of revenue. You have these teams that are just growing and thriving. And we were doing different things. You know, our teams were salaried. They were all sitting with strong benefits. You know, we were doing things that allowed people to have careers instead of passion projects on this. And what really happened as we got into this is, wow, you know, we were able to look around and say, okay, like, we'll help you. Come on in and spend the day, until our managers were like, no. What one of my managers, I'll
Tapping
never
out.
forget, it was like 2014, 2015. She called and she said, it's like a full-time job right now. Like it's like a full-time job having people come in, and people are calling all the time. They're asking about this. And we just literally like went cold turkey. We're like, I'm sorry, we can't do this anymore. We never charged for it. We just saw this as a chance to like fuel an industry that we were passionate about, to really provide like enormous health and well-being in places that, I mean, I grew up in New Orleans. We're not known for health and well-being in New Orleans. We're known for like Bourbon Street and like jambalaya. And so, you know, when we saw this and realized, hey, there's another opportunity, again, it came up. There was a very feisty man from Minnesota who just said, I don't understand. I want to come into your studios. And I was like, you can't. We're not doing this anymore. And he's like, well, you should have a business doing it. And I was like, oh, that's so nice. And I remember walking around my yard and I called my husband and I said, that's a great business idea, isn't it? And I mean, we're sitting in Pinehurst, North Carolina. Like I can literally like take you to the exact spot. And Studio Grow was born. It was born as, it was supposed to be a little side project. It was supposed to be like, hey, this is a fun project. In 2016, though, literally in a 4-month period, we got offers on every single one of our facilities unsolicited. They weren't for sale. And we went from having all of these rapidly growing facilities. We were in the process of opening additional ones. We sold actually the ones that were in pre-sale and in the process of opening. All of a sudden there I was left with Studio Grow. And I thought, you know what, we have a chance. Studio Grow was small when we started. It was supposed to provide the processes, the systems, the organization that we saw that was not intrinsic to the industry. We had seen an awful lot of people that I based, quite frankly, my first studio on, that were oftentimes, you know, VC or private equity backed. They weren't necessarily running profitable businesses. They were in mass expansion. They were all in these big tier one markets. You know, they were the Soul Cycles of the world, which could run a very different model than I could run as someone who is bootstrapping myself to success, which is, you know, probably 99% of people that are actually sitting in our industry. And I started saying, you know, if the industry is broken from a model perspective, why are we not talking about this? Why are we continuing to emulate someone who's just been given $50 million in seed money, or, you know, $75 million in private equity? Why is that the model that we're basing it on? And so Studio Grow was birthed with the idea that this was how we could build really strongly profitable studios, and that we could function in such a way that we could bring a powerful team together. We could test at a much higher level than an individual studio owner could have. We could create at a much higher level than an individual studio owner could have. And then we could collectively share that knowledge.
Well, we kind of talked earlier about the beauty of having this impact. And obviously, when you started even teaching earlier in the day, you know, your ripple was the students in that class and then expanding from there. So how far has the ripple spread now with the growth of Studio Grow?
Crazy. Yeah. So let's see. So we currently have clients in 42 countries.
Wow.
We're a team of 47, which is oftentimes surprising to people. We're a core team of about 29, and then we have an additional 18 that are part-time with us. We, as a team, have owned and operated over 100 locations in the US, Canada, Europe, the Middle East, and the APAC region. So everywhere but Central and South America and Africa at this point, although we've worked with clients in both of those regions. We have, somewhere between 1,200 and 1,800 clients in a year, but our podcast reaches 65,000 people every week. We have unbelievable trainings that reach probably about 25,000 people every single year that are studio owners. It's a reach that I did not envision for our little side project. We're always like, oh, this isn't what I had in mind. But at the same time, it's grown, and we're seeing even more exciting things that we've been able to spin off of that are hopefully adding not just to us being able to bring like great marketing practices, great standard operating procedures, all of these great ideals. But now, since the pandemic, we've been able to focus on the advocacy piece of this, on, marching on Capitol Hill and in a lot of state capitals, over the last 3 years to say, hey, how do we make sure boutique fitness has a voice? So that's been incredibly exciting to watch this evolution reach the point that we really get to impact on multiple fronts. So yes, my client is now studio owners. And it's funny, in our mission statement, when we started, we said we wanted to impact like 1 million clients. I couldn't do that on my own unless I like really expanded. But I could through my clients, and we're well past that. And we're now reaching goal number 2, which is, can we have impacted through the studios we work with 10 million clients? And we're right there at this point, which is, it's the same reason why, like, that's never changed. And I don't know that ever is going to change. That always sits as like, that's our proverbial, Amazon's chair is, how does this impact the health of the world around us? How does it change it?
All of that stems down to the same philosophy that you had, recognizing an opportunity, taking the risk, and taking action. The same formula applied with this incredible purpose and passion behind it. When you look and speak to the industry advocacy efforts, what would be your overarching message, considering you do have this incredible ripple effect? Because I know that you've been on the Hill. I know that there's, a lot of active conversation right now in passing fit, having a military background. I know that's a massive component. So talk to me about the message that you are really working to get out there, because I know that it's the voice of many that's going to make the change happen.
Yeah. So the first thing I have to say is to probably the boutique fitness industry and the health club industry together, because we've been operating as if we're two extraordinarily different industries when we're really just two sides of the same coin. We're movement as preventative health. We live on either side of that coin, and we are much more powerful as a collective industry. I recognize that a large health club different needs from an advocacy perspective than a mom and pop Pilates studio, but at the same time, I think there has to be unity amongst our entire industry. So that's been the very first thing that I think I've wanted to like make sure that we're bringing this. The second piece of this has been honestly from how can we make movement accessible? In our studios, we operated very much on the idea of corporate philanthropy. Because we were profitable, we were able to have a strong line item in our budget that literally gave back to scholarships, local people in need, making sure that we were able to get people who needed movement the most. We weren't going to say, oh, it's affordable for you. Instead, we were going to say, no, we're just paying for it for you. So whether it was, the teacher who was pregnant with her first child, whose husband was killed in a freak accident. We had our first one was a young man. He was 16 years old. He was on track to go on a athletic scholarship and be the first person in college. His mom was working 3 jobs, none of which were nice jobs. Those were the types of people that we wanted to say, hey, we've got you completely. Like, you don't have to worry about anything. And so the idea of accessibility in movement has been key. And I think the Fit Act does a remarkable job, even just by opening up, HSAs and FSAs to an awful lot of people, and recognizing that movement isn't just for adults, but that it's starting with young people through the ability to write off things like their golf lessons and their soccer league and, T-ball. I think starts a love and understanding of movement. We're in a generation, I've got 5 and 15-year-old boys, and I've helped raise 4 foster children. And you look at this and you recognize how many kids live in front of some type of screen and have forgotten that movement is an integral part of childhood. And I think even just bringing that back, mass message. And then, of course, from the military readiness front, it's funny, because of the type of work Dan did, we saw the polar end of the elite soldier. We saw, the guys who, like my husband, they'd been college athletes. They were just astoundingly, in shape. They were, a military version of a professional athlete. And so to recognize and realize that the Army wasn't hitting its baseline goals, and not by a little, but by 25%, we had an eye-opening, like, oh my God moment of, what do we need to do? Part of this is that, hey, we get kids to move a whole lot more through their childhoods. That's gonna allow for a much stronger group of 18 to 24-year-olds that are ready to walk into the military and be healthy enough to serve. And I think that that's a key differentiator, is that they're healthy enough to make it through boot camp without a major injury. They're healthy enough to make it through those early trainings without really feeling like, oh my God, this is far too much for me, and without the Army having to hold a major liability from a medical perspective. So I think this idea of the possibility of privatizing what the military is already doing, which is bringing people onto a number of bases at this point, putting them through a 90-day boot camp. It's kind of like the Army's version of The Biggest Loser. And privatizing that, it winds up being a mass cost savings to the DoD. It also winds up freeing up then DoD resources to work on things that I think are far more important in the long run from a national security perspective. So I have to say that's something both Dan and I are really passionate about at this point, because I think we all assume, like, hey, we've got a great military, but we have this idea that we're where we need to be, without recognizing that, these little issues that are backsliding the strength of where we're at can really add up in the next decade.
Even when you speak to physical activity amongst kids, I think another huge component there is because we have such a lack of the adult population moving. And we know when you're a kid, you look to your role models, you want to exemplify what you're seeing from these adults that seemingly we look up to as kids, as saying they know what they're doing and they're right. And a lot of adults are just as guilty for spending a lot of time on screens. And slowly, as a population, we're losing that love affair of really testing the capabilities of what our bodies can do. And at minimum, even just embracing how good it feels to head for a stroll after a meal. It's those little things. There's so many distractions on offer on life and this level of convenience that it's very easy to sit back. But I think what people miss and don't realize is they're actually choosing the hard without realizing it. Because what comes with that lack of movement is so devastating. Obviously, we speak so much, and it's not just jargon. Like, the chronic disease statistics that are out there are very staggering, and it is so preventative. And so it's through the work you do with all of your clients there, the work you do in advocating, that is going to be the change in getting more people to reacquaint themselves with that love of movement. So I appreciate the efforts, because I can't imagine with all that with a team of just 47, I mean, that says it right there. It's not like life isn't busy for you, but you are prioritizing a message that you believe in.
Yeah, I think it's also, I love history. And I'm from a culturally, like, a place with beautiful, rich traditions in New Orleans. The idea of movement is built in, like in Italy, you go for a passeggiata, after dinner. When I was a kid, we went for a long walk when we finished our things. I played tennis with my parents all the time. I play tennis with my kids like 4 days a week now. You get a chance. And so oftentimes I think we're like, is this just about getting people into gyms? Is this just about getting people into fitness facilities? I think that's a beautiful byproduct of this for our industry. But quite frankly, I think this is just about getting people to realize that for thousands of years, we have moved this way. This is our nature. Like, it doesn't get erased. It doesn't get changed. We haven't suddenly shifted. There's not some, I don't know, mass mutant thing that has happened, other than the fact, if we count an iPhone as becoming like the mutant predator.
Mm-hmm.
this is the difference on where we get to be. And I think if we have a chance to just remind people, just like you said, the basics, they are culturally relevant. And in some cases, like I was over in Morocco, and then went over to Italy earlier this summer, and even following some of their traditions as we were with friends of what this is. They're critical to maintaining a long-term, your relationships, not just with yourself, but with everyone else. So much bigger, so much bigger.
100% agree. Lise, I have to say, I have enjoyed this conversation so much. So to have someone of your caliber to come on and share such a story of tenacity and never giving up and constant growth, it's exactly what I said when I started. It sparked something in others. So I so appreciate you offering the time and space. I do love to leave off with either your favorite motivational quote or a little nugget of wisdom to help fuel our day. I always kind of put people on the spot because I feel like it organically gives the best nuggets. So what would be something you'd like to leave us as a lasting note?
I grew up with two amazing parents, and my mom has hospitality literally baked into her blood. And so she always fueled into me the idea that if we're sitting in a service-based industry, we are sitting in a chance to provide extraordinary hospitality, and that's offered to us every single moment of every single day, just to even go beyond the surprise and delight of someone and to spark joy in taking care of someone else. And that would be my one thing, that if I say, hey, there's a tenet that I live by, is, how do we get to bring joy back to taking care of someone else and remind people that they're not in this world all alone.
Thank you so much, because you had so many incredible takeaways, and I truly find your story just lights something up in me where I'm like, I want to get out and do all the things. So thank you for being that person and also being kind enough to share.
You are welcome. It's been a joy to be on.
You've just listened to the All Things Fitness and Wellness podcast, hosted by Chrissy Van. This episode was brought to you by Fitness World, your fitness, your way. Be sure to hit like and subscribe. We have new podcast episodes weekly featuring industry insiders and influencers. Together, we're on a mission for everyone to live a life fit and well.